and welcome to EST. If you love the established church, this is the place to have conversations about why the established church matters, how to better serve her, and to hear stories every week about how God is using the church for His glory and our good. This show is hosted by established church leaders for established church leaders. We're glad you're here.
Hey, what's up? And welcome to another episode of EST, the podcast for established church leaders by established church leaders. My name is Josh.
And I am Sam, and I have dilated eyes. And I know you can't see me for those of you who are listening, but I promise you, Josh, I'm not high right now. I'm really not.
There's been many a times I have wondered, but now you look it.
I don't get high. I'm actually not one of those kinds of pastors.
Neither.
I don't consume substances. I'm just not into that thing.
I'm high on Jesus.
There's plenty of pot around here in Florida if that's your thing, but it's not mine.
You know what? There's no place in America where there's not plenty of pot around there.
I wouldn't know.
Guarantee it.
I'm sheltered. And
what more of a meth area from what I hear.
What an intro to today's show, because we're talking about leaving a church without burning a bridge.
Bridges. Yeah.
And so we're not talking about burning something else, just burning bridges. So
right, we'll talk about that in a minute. But first, big announcement coming out of Fort Worth.
We have an incredible announcement, and it was neat when our sponsor contacted us and said, "Hey, we want to use your show to talk about some new things that we're doing." And of course, we welcome that. Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary is our sponsor. We love them. We love Dr. Greenway and their whole team over there. But they now have, as part of their institution, Texas Baptist College.
Baptist College.
And just to think, there was no Texas Baptist College before this. This you would think that in a state like Texas there would be, but where else would it be but at Southwestern?
But we're not Texans aren't, we're just not the kind of people to put our name on everything and our branding. And it goes against our humble nature. We just don't do that.
You know what I say about Texans? And I say this in all love, because Texas is my third favorite state. I've said that before, behind Florida and Arizona. Texans have a chip on their shoulder, and I understand why. That's what I like to say. It's like they have a chip on their shoulder, and it's warranted. But not really. But they're more humble at Southwestern. They really
Southwestern is humble peoples.
So let me tell you about Texas Baptist College. Southwestern Seminary has announced a new name and vision for their undergraduate college. Scarborough College is now Texas Baptist College, and TBC exists to glorify God by providing trustworthy Christian higher education for more faithful kingdom service. Wherever God calls you, you can get Christ-centered, scripture-driven, and student-focused education that you need at Texas Baptist College. So visit Texas Baptist, that's singular, TexasBaptist.com to learn more about Texas Baptist College. And look at that. I was able to read that copy even though my eyes are dilated.
Even with those dilated eyes. I will tell you, I got a kind of a weird situation as a segue. I got a weird situation.
I'm all for weird and awkward. Let's do it.
So I am a Texan, as we have discussed, and I'm a Longhorn fan, and I live in the beautiful state of Arkansas, which I love, and I love the people here who happen to be mainly Razorback fans, Arkansas Razorback fans. Well, on September 11th of this year, Texas, which is not in the same conference as Arkansas, is going to play Arkansas, and so on this Saturday, my team is playing my church's team. Sam, I needed some advice here. I know you're not really all that big a fan of football, but I don't want to preach the next day. If we win, I don't want to preach because they're going to be mad at me. And if we lose, Texas loses, I don't want to preach because they're going to be mean to me.
Oh, no, I think it's great. I think you play it up. I think, one, you stay loyal to your team.
Well, that's just not going to happen.
I've been a Rays fan, to Tampa Bay Rays, my whole life. Wherever I've moved, I've lived a good chunk of my life in Florida, but wherever I've moved, I've stayed a Rays fan. So I think you should stay loyal to your team. And, you just have fun with it. Now, I understand SEC football comes with a level of intensity. Let me just say that. And Texas isn't.
By intensity, you mean ignorance? Is that what you're saying? Or
I don't know.
I mean, that's not my opinion. I'm just questioning.
You're going to get yourself in trouble before this game
they're going to, man, we could say heresy on here and they won't even blink. If I say something about the SEC and the sham that it is, man, they're going to get so mad at me.
So I would recommend not using language like that in the pulpit.
No, I would never do that. Yeah. No, of course not.
No, I think you preach. I think you play it up a little bit and have fun with it. It's a game.
I don't know. I'm very emotionally attached to this. These 19-year-olds playing a game on a field.
It's a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds in pads beating each other up. I mean,
and it can ruin my day. Ruin my whole week.
Have fun with it and enjoy the game. And hopefully your team wins. Yeah. I guess.
Yeah.
I don't have any skin. I don't have any skin in that game.
No dog.
I don't really follow college football that much. I don't know how to follow pro football at all.
I watched a little of the baseball yesterday. Texas beat Tennessee, which happens to be another SEC team. Just throwing that out there. And that was a fun day. Although we did get spanked by Mississippi State, which is also an SEC team. But anyways, that's not our point. We're talking about leaving a place without burning a bridge. And this may just be, if I keep talking like this, they may kick me out of here and burn my house to the ground. So we're going to change subjects here a little bit. And there is a time, right, in a lot of ministers' lives. I just read an article by Herschel York. Man, where did he post that? But he reiterated similar thoughts that you and I have talked about before, he says at every pastor's ministry, 1, 3, 5, and 9, those years, 1, 3, 5, and 9, you're going to have some sort of little scuffle, a little bit of a
kerfuffle.
A kerfuffle. That's the word I was actually honestly looking for.
Kerfuffle.
I just don't say it regularly.
Underrated word.
We should have a whole segment every week. Underrated words. Kerfuffle at 1, 3, 5, and 9. And so he suggested you stay. You need to stay where you are. One of the interesting factors that he said was a lot of leaders will get to year 3, have their little kerfuffle, leave, go to another place, have another kerfuffle at 3, and they run in the danger of doing 30 years of ministry and actually only having 10 sets of 3 years. They never really did. That
was really the story of my 20s.
Really? Just running around every 3 years?
No. I started in ministry when I was 24. Okay. So I really didn't settle down for about 10 years there. So I did, but I was bivocational too. So I was hopping around a little bit. So but I'm just saying for those of you who, maybe you've moved around a little bit, I have too. But at some point you got to stop that stuff.
Yeah. You got to settle down, put a ring on it and just, say, this is my church and I'm going to settle here. So, I mean, I think what we want to do is start this conversation off with saying generally best practices. Wisdom would say you need to stay. Okay, you need to try to stay in places. However, there does come a time where maybe it's time for you to mosey on. Another underrated word, mosey. Maybe it's time for you to mosey on.
Is that a Texas word? I don't use the word mosey. I know what it means. But is that something they say out in Texas? Mosey on?
Well, I said it when I was in Texas, so therefore, yes. It's also now an Arkansan word. So if you're going to
I think you're right. I think the default is stay.
Right.
And then if God calls, he calls. But the always looking posture is just you're not going to be the best pastor, church leader you can be if you're always looking, if it's always at the forefront of your mind, if the grass is always greener, if you're always thinking about what's next. It's not very healthy. It's not killing. It is soul killing. It's not very healthy for you.
It's not even good for you.
Let me tell you, I get it. A church comes open, you hear about it. It's kind of your dream church. You think about it. Let's be honest with ourselves. Most of us do that, right? You hear of a church, you think you could kind of see yourself there.
If West Bradenton Baptist ever opened up, man, I'd be there in a heartbeat.
Let me tell you, if God removed me from this planet and the position became available, it's a sweet gig. Yeah, the pastor there's done a pretty good job of building a good team.
he's doing an excellent job. Yeah. I guess off air, we can talk about our dream churches one day, but not on the air. We can't do anything that can be traced back to us. But if it happens and you're going to go on to another location, another assignment, then how do you leave in a way that doesn't destroy things? And, we're not just talking about lead pastors. This can also just be staff staff person.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're the student minister, if you're the worship minister, and you decide it's time to go, God has led you, you and your spouse have decided this, then how do you do that? What do you think?
Well,
what's number one thought in this process?
Number one is typically there's going to be a time frame when you know that you're leaving. So let's say usually it's about a year before, okay, I know I'm on my way out, and like I'm resigning in front of everybody on a Sunday morning. It's usually about a year. Sometimes God releases you even before that. So you kind of have this release feeling, like, or in your prayer time, the Holy Spirit has released you. You're moving on, and it could be that a church opens up and you know that you need to apply or whatever, and God has just led you to do that. The best thing you can do is between the time of I'm released, whatever that looks like, and church, I'm resigning, and God's calling me somewhere else. Just enjoy your people. You can be the best pastor for them. You're not doing vision anymore. You're not making big decisions. You're not having to do difficult things. You're just there loving on people, shepherding them. You're just being a true care pastor. And so those last 6 months just need to be extraordinarily rewarding for you, investing in people, because if you do that, you're going to leave them with a very good sense of, your leadership, and just a good sense of what a pastor is. So I would encourage you, just be the best shepherd you can be. Yeah. Because you don't need to make big decisions. That's the other thing I would say is, well, why would you just be, a caregiver basically, or a chaplain, that has negative connotations when people talk about pastors. But I would say that it is a good thing, because you don't want to make big, hard decisions that the next person may not have wanted you to do.
Right. You're not.
Don't lead a church into a big building capital campaign.
Ugh.
If you're on your way out.
Yeah, that's not a good idea. I would say once you start to feel the release, you start to, there's something stirring within your soul that's like, I think God is releasing me from this assignment. I'm not sure. I really think that's a good time for counsel and to start speaking to people appropriately and with prudence. So I think right at the very beginning, you start to feel sort of a release. You're like, man, my soul is kind of getting, something's happening here. I think that's where you need to go talk to your confidants, your friends, your mentors. I don't think you need to talk to anybody within the church, leadership within the church. Like if you're on staff, don't go tell your pastor, hey, man, it's Monday and I don't really like it here anymore. You're not real sure yet. Let's pray through this a little bit, because stuff starts stirring within your supervisor's mind, your pastor's mind. That's not good. That's not helpful. So I think at first you need to do that. Now, once there is a settling, once there is okay, I do feel very strongly that my time here is ending, then I do suggest you speak to your supervisor or your pastor. Now, not everybody has that relationship, right? Sometimes that person may blow up and you're going to get fired immediately. And I've even seen people who say, no, I think convictionally I need to tell my supervisor. And I've even said, well, what do you think they're going to do? I think they might fire me.
Yeah. Then I always say, don't tell them.
Don't. There's nothing. You're not doing anything wrong by avoiding getting fired early. Okay. You're going to tell them within a reasonable amount of time, and that's probably an indication that you do need to leave. Well, definitely. I think
so if let's say you've been at a place 2-3 years, people know who you are. You're serving under a lead pastor, and you don't even feel like that you can go talk to your lead pastor about a stirring in your soul, about maybe a change in calling, or, I feel like I need to move back home or anything, or I feel now I want to go to the mission field. I mean, and you can't talk to your lead pastor about that. You probably don't need to be working under that lead pastor.
I do think
if you think the second you express anything other than your current job that you're going to get fired.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a soul issue there.
Yeah, I would
For
want
sure.
my team to tell me. Do I want them to tell me every time they have doubts about what they're doing? No, that's just taxing and dramatic. But if they really feel like God might be calling them, then I want to know. I've got a person on my team that has warned me. He warned me a couple of years ago. Hey, I've always thought that God may call me to the mission field. So as you work me on your team, wherever you're going to promote me, put me, have me doing jobs, just know that, I'm in school, and at some point God may call me to the mission field. And I think that's great. It's like, thank you. I'm not going to get surprised, and now I know how to equip you.
I think there's a soul issue there. If you feel like your pastor will blow up and fire you, then that's something you probably should think, we might need to work on this relationship, or I might need to go. If you refuse to tell your pastor, even if you think, no, I don't think he'll blow up, I'm just too cowardly to tell him, then that's your soul issue, and you need to work that out yourself. So I think telling or speaking as soon as possible. There's another thing, Sam. What do you think? Okay, so you get calls regularly. I'm sure I do. I would expect my staff to get calls, just these random either headhunters or a friend of a friend who says, I'm looking for this. I think you'd be great at it. Maybe your seminary's president or something. They're calling you up and being like, hey, here's a thing that's open. What do you think about this? Do you want your staff to tell you every time that happens? No,
not every time. But I did have a case recently where the church down the road tried to hire one of my key team members without telling
dirty
me.
Snake.
And
let's go get him.
And what's funny is my team member told that particular pastor, I'm going to go tell Sam. And he did. No. Guess what? I know who you are now. And I know who to be looking out for now.
That's right.
Come and get it, buddy. Let's, you're not taking my team. You're not stealing my team.
Yeah. So I don't
them down the road.
I don't necessarily need them to tell me every single time it happens. I expect it to happen because we hire good staff.
In that case, I'm glad that my team member told me. But every time they get a call about a position to tell me, no, if you're going to entertain it, then it might be good to give me a heads up.
I just feel like they should feel like they can. And so what I've done before is when I get a call, I tell them, just not in like, hey, everybody gather around. Here's the church that just called me. And but what I do is just like, hey, listen, that church, let's say you're from Iowa, right? Yeah. There's a church in Des Moines, like this church here, they just called, something like that. And so it's just kind of conversational. So they know that there is this open reality. I think a lot of our problems when it comes to this and burning the bridge and all that sort of stuff just happens because for some reason, even though we're in a employment situation where there is a paycheck, where there's a career, where there's resumes, where there's headhunters, we pretend like all of that's not real. It's real. Okay. So there is going to be recruiting. There is going to be,
and there's nothing wrong with that. Generally speaking,
there's nothing wrong with it. So just talk about it out in the open. It's like pretending like it's bad. And so I think you should say it.
Do you know what?
The timeline is different though.
Historically, in our tribe, Baptist tribe, not just Southern Baptist or Great Commission Baptist, if you want to use the term properly.
That's right. Great Commission Baptist.
If pastors used to get 1-year contracts.
Really?
It was a 1-year contract, and they might renew for another year, and then the church was basically kind of done with the pastor. So about 100 years ago, that was a very common practice for a pastor to come for a year.
How old were you at that time?
Me? I'm old, man, but I'm not that old. I've got the gray hair.
That's interesting though.
Yeah, 1-year contract. So we kind of forget about, the notion that a pastor would go and stay 50 years was, it came about in the mid 20th century where, you had pensions and you would go to a company and you'd stay there your whole career. I still think it's better if a pastor stays for many years, if not decades. I think that's healthier. I think that's good practice. I just don't want us to think that it's like the only way. The
Yeah,
church,
I'm not sure it's
the church
biblical.
historically has had many different ways of pastors coming and going. So the likelihood is you are going to make a few transitions in your career. And if you burn bridges, by the way, that gets around. That's the other thing. Like self-preservation should kick in just a little bit here, even if that's not the best motive. And you burn a bridge and you go out on your high horse? Is that the phrase? And you let everyone know exactly how you feel.
On your high horse.
You mosey on your high horse, and you think that you've just let them have what they need to have, and I got off my chest what I needed to get off my chest, and I told them exactly what they needed to hear. Well, guess what?
That's no bueno.
In today's world of communication and texting and social media, your next church is probably going to hear about that.
Yeah. Or the next one.
Or the next one after that. And it's just not going to be good for you. That's
also just not very nice.
Well, yeah. I mean, just about every one of our episodes could be summed up. Don't be a jerk.
Let's not do stupid stuff again.
Don't do stupid stuff again.
Let's not do stupid stuff again. Yeah, I think, okay, so we're going through a phasing of this. There's the initial sort of feelings of a release and whether or not it's time to go. Then there is actual contact with another church. I think the time frame. So if one of my employees gets a call from a church down the road and they immediately think to themselves, no way. And they tell the person, no, not interested. Thank you. And then that conversation can happen whenever it just naturally comes about. If they get a call and they are immediately, I'm not going to say tempted, because tempted sounds like they're thinking, but there's an interest there. I think at that point, you go ahead and talk and say, hey, just letting you know, I got a call from, First Baptist Big, whatever, and they want me to, consider this position. I'm actually a little interested. Could you help me with this? Here's the deal. There is no person in your life more qualified and more in a position to help you as a minister transition to another position than your pastor.
Yes.
They're not only your pastor, meaning your spiritual shepherd, but they're also in this field and actually advanced in this field. That's why they're your pastor, and so there's like so many realms of this where I think we hurt ourselves to our detriment, cutting our current pastor out of this conversation. We hurt our current church. We hurt our career because, man, I've had staff leave my church to go to another church, and they didn't know half the stuff I know about that church because I don't come in and tell them all the bad things about that church. But then they find it out later, and I was like, man, I could have told you, but you didn't ask. You just left, and I know that guy. I know their pastor, and so, that's how it goes. So I would say if there's any sort of interest, go ahead and speak to your pastor about it. That'll help you not burn the bridge down.
I think that's right. Now, if you're always going to your pastor and, saying, well, what about this and what about this? And this position's open. And, I would like to consider this. Can you help me with this? At some point, I would just say, do you know what you really want?
Right.
I mean, and by that, I mean, God's calling on your life. I mean, we're giving practical advice, so we're assuming the spiritual here. We're assuming spiritual maturity. But I've been frustrated sometimes. Even some of the people I mentor, and frustrating is probably an overstatement. I don't want to imply that it's like a terrible thing, but sometimes I've just had to tell people, like, what do you really want? Mm-hmm. What do you want? Do you want to be a lead pastor? Do you want to be a student pastor? Do you want to be a discipleship pastor? Do you want to be a missions pastor? Because it seems like you've been interested in everything. Like,
right.
What is your, and by the way, all these positions have been all over the United States. It's not like you're even focusing on a geographic area. Like,
sure. Right.
There is a danger to uncontrolled restlessness. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And if you're always restless, and I struggle with this, and the reason I'm speaking to this is because I struggle with this. There's, if you're always restless about what's next, you're not really doing what you need to do where you are.
It's not your position.
It's not, exactly. Yeah. And this is probably one of the things in my 20s that I struggled with, because I was still trying to figure out who I was as a person while I was a pastor, while I was in seminary. And oh, by the way, I'd never even read the book of Zechariah. So, here I'm having to teach the Bible to people, and I haven't even read part of it.
Yeah, so and you bring up a really good point about life stages. Look, when you're in seminary, there is a very heavy push towards academia. There's like, you're constantly hearing about the MDiv if you're in ministry. and then the PhD, and you need to go this direction and stuff like that. There is a very strong current in an academic setting, because that's the setting you're in.
Right.
And when you get outside of that current, it becomes a little bit more specified. Like, oh, I don't ever have any desire to be a professor, so I don't necessarily need a PhD. And so when I think it kind of dovetails right into what you're saying. What do you want? And I think we're saying the want, and I'm sure a couple of our listeners right now are throwing things at the whatever device they're listening on. Okay, what is the Spirit of God leading you to do? What has he gifted you to do? And what is he leading you to do? Whichever way you want to say it. We're trying to get at the same thing here. And I think it was freeing for me educationally. It was freeing for me networking. It was freeing for me where and how I'm going to serve. You've really got to settle down to what God has called you to be in that moment and in that time, and be there. And if you're in a position, let's say you're the student minister at some church, and God is calling you to be a international missionary, you need to go. You need to do that. You are hurting your current church by being disengaged, and you are not following what God has called you to do by being an international missionary. So I would just encourage, I just want to kind of like bold what Sam said. What do you want? What is God leading you and equipping you to do?
So we've talked a little bit about staff and the interaction with staff, lead pastor, other pastors on the team, other staff people. What about the people of the church? So at this point, I'm 6 years in at West Bradenton, and you know, there's some churches where I've had some deep friends, and there's other churches that I just haven't, and it's just the way that it's been. Some of them haven't stayed long enough to have deep friends, but I've got some pretty close friends at West Bradenton that even if I were to leave for whatever reason, like, we'd remain tight. We would stay in touch. We would be texting and praying for each other. When do I tell them? I mean, if God were to call me away, for the record, he's not any church members listening to this. We're just talking about it.
Close friends of Sam.
You know, I could probably count 30 friends. I mean, where like, these are not just people I'm friendly with, but people are like, no, we're close. I probably have 30 friends at West Bradenton. I'm just throwing a number out there. I don't really know how many, but it's a lot. My point is, I'm very blessed as a pastor. I have a lot of friends at my church. How do I tell them? What do you do?
Man, I don't know. I think that's tough. I think it just depends on the closeness. Even in those 30, there's going to be a few that are even closer than the others. And I would just constantly just kind of be open and honest. And it depends on how they would react to it. It depends on how they would feel about things. But I would do it sometime after leadership of the church is aware, and sometime before the church itself finds out. I do think that there's a feeling like, if I stand up in front of the church and I tell all couple hundred people at the same time, there's these 3 couples that we're really close with, and they're finding out at the same time. I don't think that's a good vibe. I would kind of say before it's completely final on the other end. So if you've got to go do what's called an in view of call, or if you've got to, like, there's a final vote or some decision-making body at the other place before they're making their final decision. So like, let's say the other church is saying, hey, next Thursday, our team's going to meet and we're going to offer you the position. I would tell them at that point. I would have already told my leadership, but at that point, I would get my friends together for dinner and be like, hey guys, listen, I got to loop y'all in on something here. And it's just the nature of it. So
I think you're right. I think that's a good general framework. After you've told key leaders, before the whole church finds out, you need to honor
final.
Yeah. You need to honor your friends. You do owe them a conversation or something, somehow communicating with them, because they're your friends. And, you know, you do risk. So if you're listening to this going, well, there's a level of risk associated with who you communicate and when you communicate to them.
Absolutely.
Of course, but that's just the nature of life. I believe that you need to, I'm big on loyalty. Most people who know me well know that about me.
It's true. He's not only popular, he's very loyal. He is.
I don't know about popular, but if you mess with my friend's wife, we're gonna go out back and I'm gonna throw some blows.
That sounds very specific.
Well, and I'm gonna through Facebook direct message. I'm gonna tell you a time and a place at the Southern Baptist Convention, and we're
in Dallas, Texas. Yeah. This is
Not-
a completely hypothetical situation.
Not that really happened.
It could possibly happen. Yeah.
But maybe it did. No, I'm not everyone may feel the way that I do about loyalty. It's just part of my makeup. It's just something I value and something I try to live by. But I do think that even if you don't have an extreme view of loyalty like I do, you still owe it to your friends. And I think that you should tell them. And I think you'd be burning a bridge if you didn't. And these are hard issues, and it's, you're going to be shedding tears and stuff. But if they are truly your friends, they will understand. I will say this though, it takes like a year. Have you noticed that? You haven't left as many churches as I have, but after about a year, people are really mad at you at first, and then things calm down, and then like a year later, you're this is after the church that you left.
Oh yeah. Like the people that are back home, there's a season of them being like, no, I'm not mad. I'm just not going to return your call for a couple months. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And mad may be too strong a term, but they're hurt, or, why'd you leave? They feel like maybe you broke loyalty because you're leaving. And, you got to give them a few months. It's not a few weeks. It's a few months, even a year. But after about a year, they start calling you back again. You start kind of talking again,
and
rebuild the friendship.
You're really bringing up, we're talking about burning a bridge, leaving a place without burning a bridge, but you've got to be a little bit careful. I wouldn't say completely don't do this, but okay, so we live in a social media world right now, and you left a church that loved you, assumably. We're going to just assume and I think this is a fair assumption, that all of our listeners are just incredible ministers and pastors. And so you left a church that they loved you, and now you're on social media posting about how awesome your new church is, way better than the last church. You could be burning bridges.
I've seen a few of those posts. Yeah, I've seen a few of those posts.
So I would occasionally try to be careful with how I am. You want to celebrate your new place. You're the new minister there, and they want to see you enjoying that. And so that's good. You want to celebrate it. I would just be very careful on how you celebrate that.
Don't play the comparative game. And never, ever, ever on social media do you need to be playing the comparative game. Like, look at this compared to this, my previous thing. I think that's dangerous. Even in cases where, like your last church fired you, which, just hypothetically.
Unceremoniously just was rude. And
there
was a coup.
And, had some issues anyway. Yeah. Won't go there. But even then, you don't need to be,
it just doesn't help
out there on social media saying terrible things.
Right. So I think that's a good point. So I think if we were going to sum something up, if somebody was sitting here, let's say one of our staff is listening to this right now, and they're thinking, okay, this is the expectation. I think the expectation is to be open, honest, pray about things. When you feel that settling, when you're settled in your heart and your spouse's heart, if you're married, go ahead and talk to your leadership and say, would you pray with me about this? I'm not sure. I'm seeking God's face in this. If you're contacted by a church and there's some interest there, go ahead and talk to your supervisor, your pastor. If that progresses, then before it's finalized, talk to your friends. And then you need to tell your church. Now, what do you think in the secular world, it's 2 weeks notice?
Yeah.
Is that the same here?
Here's what I recommend. Follow your bylaws. So we're very clear in our bylaws what's required. If it's 2 weeks, if you're kind of a key staff position, I might do 30 days if you can. But always follow your bylaws. And 2 weeks is very short notice in church world. So if
that's 2 days. Yeah.
That's
what I say.
Exactly. If you are able to give earlier notice, then that would be great. And I just got to say one last thing, because I know we're about out of time.
We are.
If you have the temptation to leave your manifesto at the church, whether in the pulpit or in writing, don't. Meaning, I'm on my way out. These people need to know what's really wrong with them. So I'm finally going to tell them. Well, that just means you haven't done your job as a pastor. There is absolutely no reason to leave a manifesto to write this long letter to the deacons, to stand in the pulpit and tell them all the things that are wrong. Mm-hmm. Well, you should have been doing that all along. So your last Sunday is not the time to do that.
It's a little cowardly. No, I'm
a little cowardly. How about a lot cowardly?
Maybe there's a situation somewhere where you're like, I'm not going to let the next family, I'm getting ran out of here and they're being mean and they were rude to my family and this place is ruthless and I'm the 17th pastor they've done this to. We all stay 3 months and then we're ran out. Okay, maybe. But if you were there for like 5 years and, there's just a couple people that get on your nerves because they just don't exactly listen to you, then I don't know.
I'd say in the vast majority of cases, the last word, I'm going to have the last word is usually a bad word. And it's a great way to burn a bridge.
Yeah, don't say bad words.
And it's a great way to build folklore around yourself in all the bad ways.
Hey, we're just way out of time. But listen.
We got to go. But hey, Texas Baptist, go to texasbaptist.com.
Texas Baptist. Is that the...
Well, I got to make sure that's what they wrote in the copy. But Texas...
No, it's right. It's not edu.
It's not edu. Okay. I was just making sure. Texas. Yep. And I'm typing all sorts of things because my eyes are still dilated.
Nope. I clicked on it. It works. texasbaptist.com. There's no S at the end of Baptist. If you do not know how to spell Baptist, then...
It's a very pretty website.
Oh, it's awesome.
All the people,
website.
Have you noticed on their website at Texas Baptist College, all the people are really happy.
Oh, they're very happy. And that's not a coincidence. They even got a picture of Dr. Greenway teaching a class.
I know. It's just amazing to me. Like, these are happy Baptists.
Beautiful pictures of stuff. Yeah. So go check it out. texasbaptist.com. And thanks for checking us out on Apple Podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast. We appreciate you.
Google Podcasts.
I listen to Spotify. So on Spotify, and we'll catch you next week.
You've been listening to EST, a discussion for the established church. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, as well as subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening.